What's happening? This is the first chapter and the first installment of The Story. So the story was created by me. I was talking with another artist, and we just started talking about the story that came up about a cave, and it developed into a full story. And so I actually ended up writing this book to accompany it, and then it just dawned on me how much I enjoy telling the story, like the oral tradition of the storytelling. And so that's going to be this. I am now bringing to you the story orally. And in between that, me telling you the story, the book isn't going to sound like what this is. It's not going to be a verbatim, exact word for word thing. But you're going to catch the story enough that when it's developed, it's going to be able to show that the aspects of mythology and storytelling kind of span the gap over everybody's on the planet. If you come from a cultural background where you're a human and storytelling is part of your world, then this is going to relate. And so here we go. So there was a young girl, right? She's walking down the forest. And as she's going down the forest, she starts to see a patch of colorless forest. The bushes, the trees, even the stream that she's going to collect the berries from start to get really gray, almost like the colors fading from the scenery. And she doesn't know what to do, and she's never seen this before, but it's definitely giving her a weird feeling. And so she runs back to the village and she tells her elders, hey, there's something going on. You know, the woods got really quiet. The more I walked down towards the berries and the stream, I immediately started to notice that the color was drained from the forest. And they tell her, this is something that we want to discuss with everybody, but it is going to take some time. Go ahead and put your baskets and berries away, and we'll go ahead and discuss this. And so they do. And as she goes to put her berries away, she wants to hear what they're discussing. So she runs around the side of the wall and she listens. And as she listens to what they're saying, they describe something that kind of terrifies her. What they do is they discuss this wizard, this wandering shadow that will go into areas and start to fold the earth. And as he takes it and creates fires and folding the earth, he makes gems deep down in the earth. And then he takes the people and the animals and everybody in the surrounding area, and he has them mine out all those gems. What he's doing is creating volcanoes. He's smashing parts of the earth because he figured out where he can get certain gems from. And then that's what he does. And nobody's really quite sure, like the humans, they're just discussing the only way we've ever seen anybody not have to do what this shadow wizard's doing is by leaving the area, and we should do that in the morning. So they go, okay, and pardon the sniffles, located allergies. But what happened was they tell her that. They actually tell them all in the morning, like the morning we're going to leave. But when the young girl hears this, what she says to herself, I should probably go collect berries. Those if we're going to leave in the morning. And she's being very thoughtful to everybody else still. She puts her, fear to the side and says, we're going to need food when we travel. And so she quickly grabs back all of her gear and she goes and she jams back out to where the berries are. Well, by this time, the color's gotten a lot worse and it's gotten darker. So she doesn't really know what to expect. So she jams down to the forest. She's bobbing and weaving around the trees, and all of a sudden she takes a step and slides down this hole. She's never seen it before. It's like a tube. It's like a volcano tunnel, basically, but she doesn't even know what this is. It wasn't there before. She slides down, and she slides and kind of stops at the bottom, and she sees all these little bitty houses. They look like houses, but she's on the ground, so she knows they're not real houses. And so she starts to sit herself up, and she sees these mushrooms. And she's never really seen mushrooms like this before, especially kind of bunched in, almost like they've been gathered and cultivated right there, like they've been farmed. And as she starts to sit herself up, she pauses because she sees something coming at her. It's kind of this taller, little muscular mushroom with fists that are made out of rocks, and it's charging at her. And she's like, oh my God, I gotta split. She stands up quick and she starts moving around. And as she's moving around, she hears him saying, get over here. Don't think you can disguise yourself as a little girl. You're the nine-toed wizard. I know you. I'm going to get you this time. She's like, wait a minute. I know what you're saying, and I'm not this wizard. And he's like, yes, you are. You can't disguise yourself as a little girl. I know who you are. I see through your disguise. You can't trick us again. And she goes, I don't know what you're talking about, but I have all my toes. And he goes, well, I would be able to prove that. My magic fist would definitely not let your toes grow back. Let's see them. And he, like, asks her in a polite manner, but still very forcibly, because he thinks that's the wizard. Let me see those toes. And she pulls out all of her toes and she starts showing him. Each one of them's there. He goes, Albie? Well, you're obviously not the wizard, but you are a little girl then. And what are you doing down here? And, if the wizard comes here or if the guards come back or something, you're going to, you can get in trouble. And she goes, I came here to get the berries. I'm actually just heard of this wizard. And I just came to get the berries because my family's going to leave in the morning. Who are you? And she asks him, and he goes, my name's Powhatan. Who are you? And she says, my name's Marie. And so Marie and Powhatan have this discussion because she doesn't know how she doesn't know how she got there, but who is he and how did he get there? And who's this wizard? And he goes, well, it's kind of a story, but if you can help me get out of here, I'll tell you all about it. We're actually trapped by the wizard. It's not just me, but my family. And what we do is we garden all the little mushrooms in the area. We garden the mushrooms on the planet with a lot of us. And the wizard knows that if he takes us and our special mushrooms, the plant can tell him where the planet is, and he can speak to parts of the earth to let him find the rocks that he can crush to make the gems. Marie's never heard of this before, but she's definitely in this state of, okay, well then, if that's the case, if that's something that this wizard's doing, then we could stop him. And then we can rescue your family too. And Powhatan's like, yeah, I would really like that because we got trapped by him, and I got sent here, and because when he showed up to where we're being captive, I punched his toe off, and he's forbidden to hurt us because we're the caretakers of the planet. As caretakers of the planet, we're ancient ones that can't be disturbed. It's forbidden law. And the wizard knows that, so what he's doing is he's trapping us, and we still cultivate these mushrooms for him. And Marie still just is so much for her to absorb, but she pretty much still just understands, get you out of here and stop the wizard from what he's doing. Take his power from him, because what he's doing is misusing these mushrooms, and without them, then he can't tell anything on the planet anymore. So she's really kind of simplified it in her head very quickly what she needs to do. And what she might need to sacrifice is just gonna happen, which is unique for a person to do, but she does it. So now she's going back, and her and Powhatan, she tells Powhatan, what are these guards? Who are you talking about? No, I see nobody out there. And he goes, well, I threw some cucumber seeds out there in the area, and the guards love the cucumbers. So I just kind of do what I need to do to get the plants and the herbs and everything to collect to do my gardening. And it's one of the ways I trick them to get away, but they might be back. And she goes, cucumbers? What do you mean cucumbers? And he goes, well, they're like frog people. He goes, the wizard has taken different animals from the area, and he's made promises with them. So some of them work for him, and some of them understand that what he's doing is wrong. He goes, so he'll have them be their guards and work for them. And she goes, well, we should get out of here, and tell me more as we leave. And so as they kind of go away, they see no guards, and then they just split, and they start running back to the village. As they run back to the village, they get there, and one of the things that on the way she says is like, well, what are these? Who should we look out for? And he goes, well, there's a few of them. He goes, big and small. He goes, the wizard went to the Boar King, and he talked to the Boar King about what he could do and how much land he'll give him. And since the boars are very greedy and they eat up everything, they were more than willing to do this for him. So we have to watch out for the boars. He goes, but luckily the Cricket King had nothing to do with him. His brother, the Locust, wants to usurp the Cricket King, but the Locusts have to check and mind themselves. So they've been disappearing, but they'll help the wizard. And so he kind of runs through all these series of animals, these different creatures that are on board with the wizard. And so in that sense, then after that, the wizard Powhatan tells her, it's not just that, but there are birds. Some crows decided to go and fly for the wizard. There's a few different things that we have to watch out for. Every troll, every ogre, every monster, even a dragon. Marie's never heard of these beasts. She might be young and she was told of these stories, but knowing that they're not that far from her landscape and she's going to have to go see them and do something about this, it's a lot for her to bear. But she still knows that to protect her family, which is one of the reasons she left just to quickly get the berries, is that's still in her head and heart. Those are still there. So she's like, okay, we're going to do it. Whatever you're saying, there's a solution for it. And so they go along, and right before they get to the village, they notice that the colorless areas are now spotting up closer to the village. They run. They get close to the village, and all of a sudden they see nobody's there. And it terrifies Marie. Marie's like panicking. She's like, my family, the wizard must have already showed up here. And one of the things they notice hanging inside of Marie's house is a plant. And this plant, it's still green. And so Powhatan goes over there and he's like, hey, hold on a minute. And he goes to the plant and he touches the plant. And he tells her that the plant is saying that her family just got to the other village. And she's like, how do you know that? And she goes, I told you, the plants talk to themselves. Mushrooms were the communicators between these. Like earth and other things need to be able to speak to themselves. And so we're the process in which that happens. And so that's what you can have when you absorb and eat these mushrooms, is there's things in there that'll help you understand. So you can become a custodian like we are of the planet. So he's sharing with her that this knowledge is actually quite sacred and protected. At the same time, though, it can be misused, and this wizard's misusing it. So now the story continues as they're describing this, and he goes, well, how do you know the plant's talking? He goes, well, the plant, I believe this plant is saying that it's a sister plant. You took this plant from a plant you have in the village. And she goes, yeah, that plant's been in the family for, my mom said, her mom and her mom, and they actually break off parts and stick the roots in and it regrows. And he goes, yeah, so that's why these plants are talking. He goes, it's really strong for us to be able to talk to the plants. But the further distance away or the more the wizard disrupts the area, then the plants can't communicate as well. And we do have difficult times talking. We can't talk to everything. But because these plants are basically, cousin plants, then we can actually speak to them. They're brother sister plants. So, there's a mother plant, and that's weird. That was more cooler. So like the plants, like let's say there's the mother plant, there can be a propagated plant that's a boy plant. There can be a propagated plant that's a girl plant. I just thought that was cool when Powhatan was telling the story to her about that setup. So then he's explaining all these cool parts of this, but then Marie's just really absorbing it, and she's like, well, I can't leave the plant here then. And he goes, well, you don't have to. It's already in a hanging thing. Just tie it to your back and, you can bring the plant with us. And she goes, okay. And so then she just grabs as much supplies as she can. She gets on her plant. She throws it over her shoulder. She has Powhatan with her, and she's off on her journey. And this is her stepping out to the unknown. She's actually going into a place that she's never been before. She's unaware of that aspect of it. And there isn't any edits and cuts in this. I'm telling you the stories from what I've been hearing these two characters say and discuss. And so then they keep walking. And as they're discussing themselves walking, and they're having a jovial time, kind of, talking, getting familiar, and also still kind of understanding what are they going to do to protect themselves. Marie's never heard about these things, and she's very strong. She tells Powhatan, I could run, I could jump, I could swim, I could fight. Powhatan says, have you ever killed anything? And she goes, no. Well, one time I hooked a worm before I was fishing, but I didn't like the way the worm, I felt it hurt, so I didn't do it anymore. I used other things to fish. I found a way to create a feather on a string and pull it. And she goes, well, that's clever. He goes, it's really smart to think out of the box so you can still fish. He goes, but you ate the fish. And she goes, well, yeah. She goes, I'll take the fish back to the village. And she goes, and I know that they're prepared differently and I can prepare them, but something felt different about hooking the worm. She goes, it wasn't like, I knew the worm would be there for a while. And so they discussed some pretty deep things, especially for Marie, because she's never talked to anybody about this. She's only heard the stories from the elders. And now to be speaking to this little mushroom person about, the fact that they're going to go and fight possibly a troll. And if that troll wants to hurt her, she's going to have to defend herself. And she might, she's going to have to struggle with that. But she'll do what she has to do. If she doesn't have to hurt it, she won't. But she still struggles with that concept. And so they're kind of going down, and then they come across this raccoon. His name's Thick, and his name's Thick because he's thick. There's this chubby raccoon. They're walking by him, and he's eating. And so as he's eating, they look over at him, and he looks up, and he kind of nods his head, and he keeps putting food in his mouth, and then they keep walking by, and they say hi, and as he watches them, they just keep walking because they realize he's not saying anything. And he just kind of feels stunned a little bit, and he starts following them. And he's not super close because he's trying to eat and carry food in his fur. I mean, he has it patched up everywhere. It's just, he's like a food walking bandit, right? And so he's going across, and they're pretty, a good few feet in front of him. And they're just, and talking still. And they get up to this part of what looks to be like industrial buildings. It's tied off by vines. It has these buildings with word beams on it. I mean, it's just really, and metal beams that are slippery. And at the bottom, there seems to be like a moat of some sort. And Powhatan stops and he goes, my sisters are in there. And she goes, what do you mean? And he goes, that's where my 3 sisters are. And their names were Bean, Squash, and Corn. They might be 3 mushroom sisters, but the 3 mushroom sisters that are Bean, Squash, and Corn have a specific role they play. So those 3 sisters we have to go get because he separated them. And they know special medicine that I'm still learning. They're much older than me. How old are you, Powhatan? And Powhatan goes, oh, I've been through 2 planets. She goes, planets? What do you mean 2 planets? And he goes, well, we're on this thing. We're on this big, what we call a planet. You might call it a turtle. You're on the turtle island. And sometimes when the turtles go away, they fall apart. And when they fall apart, a part of a turtle might fall on another turtle. And that turtle might fall on another turtle. Pretty soon this turtle's all the way down. But we can survive when the turtles break off. And so that's me. I've gone through 2 turtles. And my family, my sisters are older. They traveled with my parents, and they've been through 7 turtles. Right? He goes, this is my 3rd turtle. This is my sister's 7th. And so he's describing these things to her because it's for her, she's now kind of understanding age because she's thinking, what do you mean? The thing we're living on, he goes, yeah, how old we are is very unique because what we are is something that communicates through everything. And he goes, you do too. You're just as special as I am. And he goes, but you're a different type of person. You're a human, and humans have a different role. You guys are custodians of the planet that you're on right now. He goes, you guys help maintain the planet and the turtle you are on now. And so she's just like, okay, my elders have said these stories. I understand what you're saying. And without question, she's like, okay, then what we're doing is gonna make things better. Because she can feel it. She feels it in the conversation. And so as they're still talking and they look over there and he's like, well, I don't think you can get across those poles. And she's looking at her hands. She's like, I could do it. And he's like, yeah, jump up there and grab that pole really quick. She jumps up and poof, slips right off. Because her hands just, it's a metal. She's never quite been familiar with that before. And the raccoon walks by and he goes, I can grab it. And they look at him and he's eating and he's like, who are you? And he goes, I told you guys my name's Thick. And he goes, you didn't say anything when we walked by. And he goes, I was eating, chewing, but I said it, but I was chewing at the same time. So I'm going to finish chewing, and then I figured you could hear after I'm done. But anyways, I could do it. My name's Thick. And they're like, okay, well, it's pretty dangerous. And, they kind of like talked to him a little bit. And he goes, I heard you guys. We could do this. If your sisters are in there, we got them. And I'm nervous about that water down there. I don't know how to swim. And Powhatan, looks at him and he goes, you can float. He goes, nah, I pretty much sink. He goes, and he kind of lifts up his fur and he has all the food on him still. And he's like, why don't you take some of that off? The fur? And he's like, no, the food. And he's like, well, that's just silly. I can't take off that. Don't be silly, Powhatan. And so he's like, okay, well, you can't swim. We're going to have to swim back because that's probably the way we're getting back across. And Marie goes, well, I can swim. And Powhatan goes, that's right. You mentioned that you can swim. He goes, if you eat some of this mushroom, he goes, not a lot of it. He goes, fall asleep on the hollow of this tree. Think of Thick. Eat some of this mushroom. Think of Thick. And when you feel Thick in his head, we're going to travel across there. And when we get down to the part that's swimming, tell Thick how to swim. And she goes, can I do that? And he goes, as easy as I said. You'll eat a bit of the mushroom, fall asleep in the tree. Think of Thick. Say to yourself, Thick together. Think of Thick right between your forehead to his forehead. Look at Thick right now. And she looks at Thick and he goes, look at his forehead between his eyes. And she does. And Thick looks at her between the eyes. And he goes, okay, now eat this. Go to sleep in the hollow of the tree. And that's to protect her because she's going to be kind of like meditating. So he does. And they start going. And as they get across and they fall through and they get around the little corners, they find pretty easily his three sisters. They can tell because they see a couple, I guess they would be called kappas. There's different versions of them in different cultures. But essentially, these things are water creatures because that water's right there. And this is why they love cucumbers. Uniquely enough, these are those things that even though they're in parts of the world, these things travel differently than we know. And so I'm not necessarily what they're called in this story, but I'm going to refer to them as kappas because they really are like, hey, we're watching this spot right here. We've popped up and we're doing something because I'm not going to say that they're all bad, but these ones are working for the wizard. So these guys can be manipulated by cucumbers. And so they go over there and they got a couple cucumbers and they got them up in the little chunks. Powhatan looks around and he just chucks them. And he chucks them so far with his little muscle stone hand that they just go flying what looks like an impossible distance. But definitely Powhatan's like, we still have to hurry. So as the two little guards go, as they take off, they quickly run in there and they're like, hey, bean, squash, corn, we should go. And they're like, oh my gosh, Powhatan, it's you. And who's this? And they're like, Mary. And oh no, this is Thick. And Mary's accompanying Thick. And they look at both of them and they say, nice to meet you, Mary. Nice to meet you, Thick. Let's go. They jump on the back of Thick and they go, because he has all the little foldy spots, and they start jamming. And as they get to that part where Thick can't swim through it, Marie kind of jumps into his front part of his consciousness and says, is this where I can help you swim? And Thick is like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. I don't know what to do. And Powhatan says, calm down, just breathe, and allow Marie to help tell you what to do. Don't think of what you're doing. Trust in you know what you're doing. Trust in as what you're doing repeatedly will get you through the motions and you'll get there because Marie's telling you the information. And he does. And he's just kind of, little paddling along. And right till they get to the side, each sister jumps off. Powhatan jumps off. And right as he lands, boom, Thick goes under. What happens? Don't know, right? Right as Thick gets under, he kind of wiggles around and he feels his tail being pulled. And so because it's like a line, he pulls himself back to the end of his tail and he sees an eel had bit the back end of his tail. And so he grabs his thumb and he grabs his fingers and he jabs them into the eyes and the mouth of the eel really quick. And the eel starts opening his mouth and trying to figure out what's going on. Lets go his tail. He starts scrambling up as quick as he can. He's not sure how to float and get himself up. But right as he breaks the threshold of the water, Powhatan grabs his little paw, pulls him and flicks him up out of the water right as the eel shoots up after his tail and then comes up and flaps back down. He's exhausted. He's terrified. Terrified of water, terrified of whatever the crap that was that just grabbed him. And so they are off. And so they take off and they get back to what they're starting to call as a little sanctuary, because they had to create a little place that they were going to be safe in. And so through one of these tubes out into the middle of the forest under a lake, they discovered that this could be a safe place and they can build up a protection area that the wizard couldn't penetrate, because they didn't have one before. That's how the wizard got them. But now that they know the wizard's tricks, they can be better prepared. And so right as they get there, Marie's out of the tree, right? They're going along the path. And then that's when they come across Thick. Thick is separated from the batch. The three sisters are now sitting with Powhatan and Marie, and they're talking, and Thick is walking away, and he is still drenched. He's like skinny fur, right? Little fucking mud spatches everywhere. And so he goes over to this little water piece, and he's kind of like in shock still because of the water. He didn't know how to swim, and he just did something very different. And so it was just, it's really still, shocking for him. And he looks over at the water and he sees a face in the water, and it's telling him to come here, and it looks happy. And Thick kind of looks at him, and the thing goes like this to him, and he's like to wash himself. And Thick goes over there, and he does. And he actually starts playing and having a little more fun because the water spirit's doing that and helping him. And so as he gets himself all clean, he starts to kind of feel like it wasn't the water he needs to be afraid of. It was the fact that eel bit him. That eel got his tail. So it wasn't his fault necessarily to be afraid of the water. And so he's now happy, and he starts to walk away, and the water spirit looks sad. And he doesn't know why, but as he looks down, he realizes he didn't say bye or thank you. And so he goes down to the water, and he says thank you, and he says bye. And the water spirit says bye and gets excited and takes back off up the stream. And so now that he's clean and he feels better, he goes over there and he meets with Powhatan, Marie, Corn, Squash, and Bean. And so as he's sitting with them, he hears them discuss what their next step is. The next step is to go rescue the rest of the family. And I'll finish telling a little bit more of this, but I'll probably stop in just a moment so we can get to the next chapter. But as well, the next half, we'll do a 30-minute and then another 30-minute story time. But so as they're sitting there, the three sisters say, you guys should probably go see the Spider Ode, because the Spider Ode is the one that let the secret out. It's the one that let the wizard know what to do. And so we have something for you to travel with. And so what they do is the three sisters go out to the forest, and they talk to all the spiders, and they have them weave together a special cloak. And she comes back, and Corn tells Marie, this special cape will protect you in the rain. It'll keep you warm in the cold. It's incredibly strong, and it'll keep you from arrows. Things won't be able to stab through this. It's a special cloth, right? And so she's extremely thankful. And Bean lets her know, with this thing, when you go see the Spider Ode will be able to tell that you came from us, not to harm you. But be aware, the Spider Ode will try to harm you. It will try to take you. But you aren't going to go, and you aren't going to give up. Squash tells them, as you guys travel, remember to be safe. Stay unseen and stay unheard. If you can do your best, capture and rescue the rest of the family before we start finding a way to take out the wizard. Because the three sisters very much wisely know that there's going to be a battle at hand, but they don't want to overwhelm Marie. And if they can, they'd like to get her back safely, and then they'd be able to take care of the rest of the issues. But there's a good chance that Marie's probably going to be there with them till the end. So we'll see how the story continues. And now they're off. This is the first installment of, well, the story title is still going through. So I like Marie and the Mushroom Kingdom. But essentially, this is just also a story about Powhatan and his family. This is, it's a story that I got from beginning to end. And this is me telling you the oral tradition end of it. And so, yeah, beauty.